Thank you. Hi, everyone. These are exciting times for the game industry. Times for evolutions, revolutions, times to reinvent ourselves one more time, times to reassess who we are, how we do things, how we could do them differently, how we can do them better. Today I'm going to tell you about my vision for the future of this industry. But before we talk about where we want to go, it's important to understand where we stand and who we are. So when I was working on this presentation, this idea of the Peter Pan syndrome quickly came to my mind. The Peter Pan syndrome, it's this concept of someone who is anxious at the idea of growing up and becoming an adult, and who actually refuses to grow up. So that's quite a bold statement to make about an entire industry. So let's see how I reached this conclusion. First of all, I wanted to better understand what this industry exactly is. So I thought, let's have a look at the best-selling titles of all time, and let's see what these games are. And this is what I found. So, in short, titles in red come from Nintendo. Titles in black are the Call of Duty franchise. Orange is Grand Theft Auto. And green is Kinect Adventures. So that's a very interesting information about who we are. Because the first thing you discover is that this market is highly polarized. But only four brands, if you consider Nintendo as one brand, trust the top 30. And 21 titles out of 30 come from Nintendo. Only 3 genres trust the charts. Kids games, so that with Nintendo. Casual games, Nintendo, Kinect. And violent action games, Call of Duty, and GTA. Only 3 genres. So this is this industry that is really, really focused. Kids, casual, violent games. Now let's talk about how games have evolved over the past 40 years. And when you think about it, you realize that we use the same themes, the same worlds, for about 40 years. The worlds we use, usually war, conflicts, heroic fantasy, sci-fi. It's pretty much always the same. I mean, the themes we talk about, you are a hero and you need to kill people in order to go somewhere to free the world or to free the princess or whatever. And when you look at, if you compare Wolfenstein in 1992 and Call of Duty in 2012, you realize that there's been a tremendous evolution in matter of graphics. I mean, really, the graphics are now absolutely spectacular, stellar, incredibly realistic. But when you think about the concepts beyond these games, you realize that they are really close. They have not changed much in 20 years. You still have this subjective view, you still have a gun, you still need to run and crouch and kill people before they kill you. We use the same paradigms. All games are based on systems, and the idea is that you need to master this system to beat the computer or beat your friends. But it's always a loop, patterns, mechanics, however you call them, always the same. We also realize that most games are based on violent actions or platform, where you need to jump or you need to climb, whatever. But these are the key paradigms that have not really changed over the past 40 years. Video games also live in what I call Wonderland. They live in a dimension that is absolutely not connected to the real world. They're not connected to our reality. They talk about things that are totally unrelated to what we all know. It's not about people, it's not about our world, it's about a different dimension, a different world, something that I call Wonderland. As a conclusion, of course, we have the same audience for 40 years. No surprise, we make the same games the same way. Well, we reach the same people. No big deal, and that's absolutely something obvious. Okay, so why should games even consider to change? After all, we're quite a successful industry for 40 years. We managed to sell our games about $59, $69 to our customers. They seem happy about it. We are happy to make these games. Why should we even consider changing all this? Because it seems to work, in a way. Well, there are several reasons why I believe we should evolve. First thing, I think that games, video games as we know them, are today under heavy pressure. The landscape changes very quickly around us. You see new platforms appearing pretty much every week these days. So there are more platforms than ever, at least announced. Digital distribution, of course this is a revolution. And this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. We have not seen all the repercussions of this. We also face tougher competition regarding people's entertainment time. There are only 24 hours in a day, but now it's shared between TV, books, cinema, internet, Facebook, social networks, mobile phones, tablets, and console games. So there are many more things to do for people. What can we do to make sure that they keep playing our games, that we remain appealing, exciting enough for them, so they prefer to spend their entertainment time playing our games versus playing on their iPhone or on social networks. We make the same games over and over. This is also an issue for our industry. It's okay for young kids who start to play now, but for older people, older gamers, this is an issue. I mean, many times starting a new game, I had the feeling that I already played it 1,000 times. Innovation, the lack of innovation, is an issue for any industry, and the game industry is no exception. My gut feeling is that we need to find ways to reach a wider audience. We need to move from our traditional market, which is mainly kids, teenagers, young adults, as we saw it. We need to move from this market to a wider market where we can talk to anyone, we can make anybody play. Sometimes when I say this, people react and say, what do you mean? Everybody plays. Yes and no. Think about your friends who don't play. Think about your parents. Do they play console games? Think about your grandparents. Most of the time, they don't play video games. They barely know they exist, and they have absolutely no interest whatsoever. What is strange is that if you talk to them about movies, about TV series, about books, this is something you can share with them. You can talk about your favorite book or your favorite movie because they probably enjoyed it too. But if you talk about your experience talking, playing Call of Duty, there is a good chance they will say, what are you talking about? Don't have a clue. Don't play video games. So how can we reach this huge untapped market of people who are not playing our games today? Here's my contribution to this debate. 9 things I believe we should change to grow up. First thing, you got it. Let's make games for all audience. How can we create content that will talk to your mother or to your grandfather? How can we make them play? How is it possible to do this? Because I believe it's time for this industry to do something it has not done yet in 40 years. Can we create content, interactive experiences for an adult audience? And we'll see how we can do this. If we want to reach this new audience, we need to change our paradigms. We cannot keep doing the same games the same way and hope to expand our market over the night, because it won't happen. First thing, we need to decide as an industry that violence and platforms are not the only way. We are in an industry where if the main character doesn't hold a gun, designers don't even know what to do. I mean, how interactive is it if I can't shoot? I remember when I was a younger designer, I pitched games to publishers. And I remember this famous meeting with an American publisher, and I was trying to explain what Indigo Prophecy was about. It was really about storytelling and emotion and relationships and characters. And he asked me, so what kind of weapons has the hero? And I said, well, the hero doesn't have a weapon. So he seemed embarrassed, and he said, oh, okay, I got it. So he drives cars. No, he doesn't drive cars. He seemed embarrassed again, and he said, oh, he jumps on platforms. No, it doesn't jump on platform. And his reaction was, then it's not a game. Yeah, because you can define interactivity in many different ways. It's not about shooting and jumping. It's about doing different things. It's about making choices and seeing the repercussions of your choices. Can we make games that are not based on systems? Because for most people out there, mastering a system is not something exciting. It's something boring. And actually, you don't want to compete with people when you get older. When you're a kid, that's fine. When you're a teenager, that's fine. But when you're an old guy like me, you're 44, you know what? I don't want to compete with my 10-year-old neighbor because he's going to kick my ass. And I don't want to feel, this strange experience of getting my ass kicked by a 10-year-old. So I'm not interested in mastering a system. I'm not interested in beating the computer. I'm not interested in showing how fast I can be. I'm not interested in all this. Next thing, can we make games with no gun? That's an interesting challenge for the entire industry. My point 3 is the importance of meaning. Meaning is something extremely important. And when you think about it, you realize that many games have absolutely nothing to say. They are quite empty. They are just here to make you spend a good moment, have fun, trigger some adrenaline in your system, and that's cool. And that's enough for most people out there. And that's cool. There's nothing against that. But that's a toy. That's a toy. Can we create games that have something to say? Can we have games that have a meaning, that carry an idea, that tell you something that you can resonate with? There are people who build their life around this idea of creating meaningful content, and these people are called authors. Authors are writers. They develop the technique, they develop the skills, they develop the talent to create meaningful experiences. But games today, most of the time, again, not all of them, most of them, are written by the programmers and the graphic artists and the marketing team, and you got 20 people in a room, and let's imagine a story. And that's fine, and some games are great done this way. But sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes it's even worse. Sometimes it's just about the team putting mechanics together and hiring a writer, like 2 weeks before the master to try to find a story to put all these things together. That doesn't work. We need to have authors really at the heart of the project. All real-world themes should be used. What I mean by that is any theme in real life that you see in movies or in films or in TV series could be used in a game. Could we create games that talk about society, that talk about human relationships, talk about feelings and emotion, that talk about politics, that talk about homosexuality? Why not? I mean, we need to put games, again, at the center of our society and our lives. I mean, games shouldn't be in a separate dimension. They should be in our world, and they should talk about people. They should talk about our world. They should talk about relationships. They should talk about society. And games can do that in a very unique way. Because unlike in films where you're just passive and you watch something, in games you can interact with that, which opens a totally new dimension, a new way to interact with the environment, a new way for the experience to be a mirror that reflects who you are, what are the choices that you make. And if you manage to do this, you will achieve something very interesting, is that by the time you will turn off your console, the game will leave an imprint in you. You will keep thinking about what you've seen. And this is, in my mind, what any creative medium should achieve. 4, we should become accessible. We should focus on what happens in the minds of the players and not on how fast they can move their thumbs. How important is that? Who cares? Let's focus on what happens in the minds of the player, what they feel, not so much how they do it. Journey versus challenge, this is a very important concept to me, is how do we define the experience? Is it a challenge? Is it a series of obstacles that the player has to go through, again, mastering the system? Or could it be just a journey, just a moment that you spend, a moment that you really enjoyed, something that you lived? I think there are some games doing this. There is this game called Journey, of course, which is a perfect example of that, but there are many other games doing it in a very different and interesting way. 5, bring other talents on board. I was fortunate enough to start my career as a designer working with famous singer David Bowie, making him one of the first virtual actors in real-time 3D in the industry. And I was fortunate, again, to work with Canadian actress Ellen Page on my next game to be released later this year called Beyond. Working with these people has been an amazing experience, as you can imagine. They came to the game industry because that was something new to them. They were interested by the experience, discovering what interactivity was about and how different it could be. And at the same time, they came with their huge, massive, impressive talent. And I think it was beneficial to both parts. They, as far as I know, enjoyed their experience. And they definitely helped us to improve the experience. Which leads me to my point 6, which is we need to establish new relationships with Hollywood. Relationships with Hollywood were really based on a misunderstanding, I would say, for a long time. Hollywood, for a long time, sees video games like licensed products or like the $1 billion of the weekend industry. And I think that's not right. This is not the right way to build a relationship. I think that games are more than that. It can be a respected medium now, at the same level than films, although we still have a long way to go and a lot to learn, but we should respect each other. But I think now time has come for a meaningful, constructive, balanced, new partnership. We can work together differently, and we can invent together a new form of entertainment. They master the linear storytelling. They know how to do this for 100 years. We master the interactive part. We master the interactivity and these strange relationships between the player and the experience. Point 7 is about changing our relationship with censorship. I could probably spend about 4 hours just on this slide, but I won't do it, of course. You can stay. Relationship with censorship is something extremely sensitive and extremely difficult. I see myself as a writer. I try to write scripts, talking about characters, emotions, relationships, dialogues. And sometimes I use violence. Sometimes I use sex. And that's fine. Most of the time it's fine. But now I have someone over my shoulder looking at what I'm writing and saying, oh, you can't do this. No, you need to change that. No, that's not possible. I mean, why it's not possible? Why? Why could you do these things in a film? Why would it be okay in TV series? Why isn't it okay in a game? And the answer is always the same. It's because you are interactive. And that's your problem. I mean, it's difficult because there have been many, many experiments worldwide. It's been demonstrated 1,000 times that being interactive doesn't change the impact of the experience. It's been judged by a court here in the US who said what they said. It is no different than films or TV series. And it should be protected by the First Amendment, freedom of speech. So this is very important. if you want to bring others, you need to let them express themselves and write about things. And as long as violence or sex is put in context and supports the narrative in a way or another, that's fine. Why would we have different laws, different constraints than films or TV series? Actually, the constraints we have are the constraints that films had in the 50s. In the 50s, 60 years ago. That's crazy, and this is definitely something I would like to change, to see changing in the future. On the other hand, I must confess that I was quite shocked, but some things I've seen at the last E3. Some games just go over the top for the sake of having more blood or more sex or being more shocking than their competitors. And I think that's also a mistake. We want to get credibility. We can use, again, sex and violence, that's fine. If there is a context, if it's not gratuitous, if it's not for the sake of being shocking, that's okay. But sometimes we go too far and we behave like stupid teenagers ourselves. And we should stop doing this, because this is a matter of being responsible towards our industry, but also towards society. If we don't want to be accused of being responsible each time something terrible happens, we should also behave in a different way and start to be responsible about what we're doing and show that we are not a bunch of teenagers, that we are responsible, that we're serious, that we respect ourselves, our mediums, and our customers. Okay, this is the part that will definitely make me popular with press. I think press has a very important role to play in this evolution and this big change I'm hoping for. Press, you have on one side very clever people. They think about the industry, they analyze it, they try to see how it could go in the future, they try to educate, to evangelize, to do whatever. Very clever bunch of people. Thank you so much. On the other side of the spectrum, you got people giving scores, just scores. Oh, you got a camera bug, so you have a 5 out of 10. Oh, AI is not that good, we'll have a 6. Oh, really, the story was kind of boring, you got a 6. Okay, I don't think this is press. This is not press. Where is the analysis? Where is the thinking behind all this? Where is it? Can anyone give his opinion and be respected as a critic? No, I think that being a critic is a very serious job. It's not because you like video games or you play video games that you become a critic. No, that's not the case. Being a critic is a job. It requires skills, it requires talent. Not everybody has it. I have a very French example about this. It's called Le Cahiers du Cinéma in France. It's a magazine, mainly in the 50s, 60s. They played a very important role in a revolution in French cinema called La Nouvelle Vague. And they played a very important role at that point that some of these journalists, these critics, became very famous directors themselves. But they were really thinking in a very particular and interesting way, and they actually actively participated in making French movies better. Of course, how can we talk about the industry without mentioning gamers? Gamers are, of course, very important. I often think that buying or not buying a game is almost like a political vote. It's like voting. Buying a game is like voting. You decide if you want the industry to go in this direction or not go in this direction. Buy crop, and you will get more crop. Buy exciting, ambitious, risky games, and you will get more of them. This is the message that you send to the industry. So, buying a game is also a matter of responsibility, and you need to keep in mind when you buy games that you vote for where you want the industry to go. What future? This is my conclusion, finally. My hope is to see the emergence of what I call digital entertainment. Finally, there will still be video games on one side And they will still be incredibly popular and successful, and people will keep loving them and buying them, and there are great studios doing them, and that's great. And it's going to be very successful in the future. My hope is that in the coming years, we will see the rise of digital entertainment. And this new form of entertainment should be accessible to all, should be open to all themes and genres, and should be able to talk about ourselves, talk about human beings, talk about society in a meaningful way. Should be based on the journey and not the challenge. Should be cross-platform, because I think it's a strong tendency that people want to play on their video game console and then keep playing on a mobile phone, on their tablets, or whatever. And finally, we will have a chance to become mass market. So this is my hope for this industry. And again, this is a medium that I love more than anything. This is something I do for my living for 16 years. And I think it's an amazing medium, unlike anything else. Films can't compare. There are different experiences. What we have here is absolutely unique, absolutely different. But I think it's time for us to accept this idea of growing up and finally to become adults. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.